He was, for many, the original Hollywood playboy. For decades, Warren Beatty's name meant a dazzling smile, undeniable talent, and a list of romantic partners that read like a who's who of Hollywood royalty. The tabloids couldn't get enough of him, spinning tales of his legendary charm and seemingly endless affairs. He was the man every woman wanted, and, well, it often seemed, every woman had. But behind that carefully polished image of the ultimate seducer, a much more complex, and maybe far more disturbing, story was being written. Whispers followed him for years, whispers that went beyond just romantic flings, hinting at something darker under that legendary status. Now, with new legal troubles casting a long shadow over his past, the carefully built facade of Warren Beatty, the ultimate Hollywood insider, might just be revealing cracks that go deeper, and into some pretty murky territory, than anyone ever dared to think. Hollywood's always been a town of dazzling illusions, right? A place where perfectly crafted images can hide a whole lot of secrets. But what happens when the charm of one of its most enduring icons, a man who pretty much defined on-screen charisma and off-screen desire, starts to sour under the weight of accusations that are anything but glamorous? We're not just talking about broken hearts and tabloid headlines anymore. We're talking about allegations that force us to re-examine a celebrated past, suggesting the truth behind the legend is way more shocking than the gossip columns ever dreamed. To really get the massive shift in Warren Beatty's public story, we first have to look at the incredible legend he built. From the moment he hit the Hollywood scene in the early 1960s with Splendor in the Grass, Henry Warren Beatty, Shirley MacLaine's charismatic younger brother, was clearly going to be a star. And with that stardom came an almost mythical reputation as a lover. His romantic life wasn't just a side note to his career, for a lot of people, it was the main story. The media couldn't get enough, and for decades, Beatty was linked to an incredible lineup of some of the world's most beautiful and famous women. The names are legendary: Natalie Wood, his Splendor in the Grass co-star, whose already fragile emotional state was reportedly devastated by their turbulent relationship. Then there was Julie Christie, with whom he shared a significant and creatively rich period, co-starring in McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Shampoo. Diane Keaton, another iconic actress whose life mixed with Beatty's both on and off screen. And the list just keeps going, a galaxy of Hollywood A-listers, music superstars, and international beauties. Cher, Madonna, Joan Collins, Brigitte Bardot, Leslie Caron, and Carly Simon, whose hit, You're So Vain, is famously rumored to be about Beatty, a claim he's sort of, in a roundabout way, almost confirmed. Biographers and gossip columnists have tossed around some mind-boggling numbers when it comes to Beatty's partners. Peter Biskine's 2010 biography, Star, How Warren Beatty Seduced America, notoriously claimed he'd slept with nearly 13,000 women. Beatty himself has shot down this specific number, calling it an exaggeration and pretty much impossible, saying you'd have to be with multiple new partners every single day to hit a figure like that. He once said, "Look, I never misled anyone. And I'm a nice guy." He argued the press just cooked up this man-slut persona. Still, the stories kept coming, painting a picture of a man who moved smoothly from one high-profile affair to the next, often with a lot of overlap, feeding the tabloid frenzy. His affair with Joan Collins reportedly led to a pregnancy, which she chose to terminate, apparently fearing a scandal. He was linked to Vivian Leigh while she was still married, and at the same time to Susan Strasberg, all while his main relationship was supposedly with Natalie Wood. Even a brief encounter with Marilyn Monroe shortly before her death just added another layer to his mystique. His approach was described as incredibly focused and persistent. He wasn't just passively admired, he was an active, and often relentless, pursuer. This reputation for serial monogamy, or maybe more accurately, serial passionate affairs, was so set in stone that any public appearance with an attractive woman was enough to kick off a new wave of rumors. For a generation, he was the embodiment of Hollywood glamour and sexual freedom, a walking, talking symbol of a certain kind of masculine ideal, powerful, irresistible, and apparently free from normal rules. His film, Shampoo, where he played a promiscuous hairdresser juggling multiple lovers, almost seemed like life imitating art, or maybe art imitating life. This carefully managed image of the charming, irresistible playboy was key to his public persona, a role he played perfectly for decades, a role the public and the media ate up. But even with all the adoration and endless gossip, darker whispers were starting to bubble up, suggesting that playboy persona might be hiding something more troubling. While the tabloids loved counting Beatty's alleged conquests, the human cost of some of these relationships often got ignored, or at best, was just seen as collateral damage in the glamorous life of Hollywood's top lover. But these weren't just quick flings for everyone involved. For some, their time with Beatty left deep and lasting scars. The story of Natalie Wood is probably one of the most heartbreaking examples. Their relationship in the early 1960s was intense and all over the news. Wood, already a major star but also known for being emotionally vulnerable, was reportedly deeply in love with Beatty. However, the relationship was chaotic, supposedly marked by Beatty's cheating and a kind of emotional distance. The strain of this, on top of other pressures in her life, reportedly took a huge toll on Wood. Sources claim that her emotional struggles got much worse because of her involvement with Beatty, leading to a well-documented suicide attempt after a particularly upsetting encounter with him. While Beatty can't be solely blamed for Wood's inner turmoil, the story of their relationship paints a picture of a young woman left heartbroken and emotionally shattered by his legendary charm. Then there's Carrie Fisher's account. In her memoir, The Princess Diarist, Fisher, who worked with Beatty on the film Shampoo in 1975, talked about an unsettling encounter. She was just 17 at the time, about to become a megastar with Star Wars. Beatty, then in his late 30s and at the peak of his Shampoo-era fame, allegedly made a move on the young actress. Fisher said she turned him down. This incident, told years later, adds a more disturbing layer to Beatty's playboy image. It wasn't just about charming adult women his own age. In this instance, it was about a powerful, established Hollywood figure allegedly pressuring a teenager. The age difference and the power imbalance in their Hollywood positions at the time definitely cast his actions in a more predatory light. Even Cher's alleged affair with Beatty back in 1962, when she was reportedly just 16, raises similar red flags, though details from that time are often seen through the less critical lens of the past. These stories, coming out over time, started to paint a more complex, and frankly, more troubling picture than just a man who loved women. They hinted at a pattern where the desires and vulnerabilities of others, especially younger women, might have been less important than his own pursuits. Beatty, for his part, has often said that many of his relationships were meaningful and long-term, and that he's still on good terms with several of his ex-partners. He's also actively tried to downplay the more over-the-top parts of his reputation, claiming the media blew his exploits out of proportion. However, these specific accounts from women like Wood, through biographies, and Fisher directly, suggest that the charming playboy story often hid a reality that was far less romantic and potentially exploitative for those involved. These weren't just scandals, in a light, gossipy way, they were stories of real emotional impact, and in Fisher's case, an early warning of behavior that, looking back now, feels much more serious. The cracks in that smooth facade were starting to show, long before any legal bombshells threatened to break it wide open. For decades, Warren Beatty's scandals were mostly about romantic drama and tabloid gossip. While sometimes messy and emotionally damaging for those involved, they rarely tipped over into legal trouble. That all changed dramatically in November 2022, throwing Beatty's past into a harsh new light and giving a chilling new meaning to the phrase, "Scandals go deeper than we thought." A woman named Christina Charlotte Hirsch filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court, accusing Warren Beatty of forcing her into sex when she was a minor, almost 50 years earlier, in 1973. At the time of the alleged incidents, Hirsch said she was 14 or 15 years old, while Beatty would have been around 35. The lawsuit, though it didn't initially name Beatty directly, identified the defendant as the actor nominated for an Academy Award for playing Clyde in the iconic 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, a pretty clear reference to Beatty. According to the complaint, Hirsch alleged she met Beatty on a movie set. After this meeting, she claimed Beatty paid undue attention to her, commented on her looks, gave her his phone number, and told her to call him. The suit detailed how Beatty allegedly used his role, status, and power as a famous Hollywood star to get access to, groom, manipulate, exploit, and coerce sexual contact from her. Hirsch alleged that Beatty invited her to the hotel where he was living and took her on car rides. The lawsuit specified that Beatty coerced sexual contact with her frequently, including oral sex, simulated sex, and eventually, coerced sexual intercourse. Hirsch said she believed at the time that she was in a romantic relationship with the movie star. She claimed that as a direct result of the alleged abuse, she suffered severe and lasting emotional, physical, and psychological distress, affecting her ability to interact with others and causing issues with trust and control. This lawsuit was possible because of a California law, Assembly Bill 218, which temporarily lifted the statute of limitations for certain sexual abuse claims. This look-back window, which closed for older victims at the end of 2022, allowed people to file civil suits for decades-old allegations of childhood sexual abuse, leading to a wave of lawsuits against prominent figures and institutions. Hirsch's lawsuit against Beatty was filed under this law. The allegations are incredibly serious, painting a picture a million miles away from the charming rogue persona Beatty built. They point to an alleged abuse of power and the exploitation of a minor, using fame and status as tools for coercion. These aren't tales of a Hollywood playboy navigating adult relationships, these are accusations of grooming and sexual abuse of a child. However, the legal story took a turn. In December 2023, the lawsuit filed by Christina Charlotte Hirsch against Warren Beatty was dismissed by a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge. The dismissal reportedly happened because Hirsch didn't replace her lawyer after her original attorney asked to step down in July of that year. The judge also noted that Beatty hadn't been served with the complaint. The dismissal was with prejudice, which means the case cannot be refiled. While the dismissal means Hirsch's specific allegations won't be fought out in court in this particular case, the accusations themselves cast a long, dark shadow. They brought forward claims far more disturbing than anything previously linked to Beatty in a public and legal setting. The very fact that such a lawsuit was filed, using a specific legal window for past abuses, changed the conversation around Beatty. It forced a re-examination of his past, moving beyond the story of a prolific lover to face allegations of something much more sinister. Beatty's legal team didn't make public statements about the allegations while the lawsuit was active. The dismissal on procedural grounds doesn't just wipe away the seriousness of the claims. For many, the mere existence of such a lawsuit, detailing alleged grooming and sexual coercion of a minor, has permanently damaged Beatty's carefully crafted image. It suggests that the endless rumors around him might have indeed hidden truths far more shocking than the tabloids ever dared to print, even if those truths won't be tested in court this time. The idea of emerging legal troubles became very real, even if its resolution was procedural rather than a judgment on the claims themselves. The questions raised, though, still hang heavy in the air. Throughout his long career, Warren Beatty has been famously private about his personal life, even though it's been the subject of intense public fascination and non-stop media coverage. He rarely gave interviews for long stretches, and when he did, he often spoke in vague, carefully chosen words, especially when it came to his relationships. This careful control of his public image makes his responses, or lack of them, to the various scandals, and his overall reputation even more telling. Regarding his famous reputation as a Lothario, or Hollywood's most notorious playboy, Beatty has consistently tried to tone down the more sensational stories. He has, more than once, denied the almost mythical numbers of romantic partners linked to him, especially that 12,775 figure made popular by Peter Biskine's biography. Beatty has suggested numbers like that are just media hype, a caricature created to sell papers and books. In a 2016 interview with AARP the magazine, he joked, "Think about it, sleeping with 12,775 people. That would mean not just that there were multiple people a day, but that there was no repetition." He's often described his past relationships as more meaningful and often long-term than the quick conquests the tabloids love to report. He's pointed out that he stayed on good terms with many of his former partners, implying a level of respect and mutual affection that doesn't fit the image of a heartless Casanova. This defense strategy basically paints Beatty as a victim of his own legend, a man whose actual romantic history, while maybe unconventional, was twisted by an overeager press hungry for scandalous headlines. He once said, "I have never talked about my personal relationships with women, my sister, my parents, because these are important people to me. I don't want to hurt them by discussing them in public." This suggests a desire to protect others, which clashes sharply with the image of someone careless with others' feelings. He's also been quoted as saying, "I don't mind if they make me out a bastard, I just don't want them to make me out an idiot." When it came to the much more serious legal allegations from Christina Charlotte Hirsch, Beatty and his legal team stayed mostly silent publicly while the lawsuit was active. This is a common legal tactic: don't comment on ongoing lawsuits. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed on procedural grounds in December 2023, because the plaintiff didn't get new legal representation after her attorney withdrew, and Beatty had reportedly not been served with the complaint. This dismissal, with prejudice, means those specific claims can't be brought to court again. But this outcome, while legally closing that chapter, doesn't necessarily clear Beatty in the court of public opinion. The nature of the allegations, coercion and sexual abuse of a minor, are so severe that they inevitably change how people see his past, no matter how the lawsuit ended. The difference between Beatty's carefully crafted image of a charming, if somewhat roguish, leading man and the stark allegations of predatory behavior is pretty jarring. His past attempts to manage his story by downplaying the playboy excesses now sit very uncomfortably next to accusations that suggest a much darker pattern of behavior. For decades, his mystique was built on a mix of undeniable talent, charisma, and a hint of romantic danger. The question now is whether that danger was more real and damaging than his carefully constructed image ever let the public see. His recent reclusiveness, with few public appearances, also fuels speculation, though some reports say this is due to potential health issues or just a desire to avoid public scrutiny. The man who once expertly controlled his narrative now finds it permanently changed by claims that go way beyond simple Hollywood gossip. Just when it seemed Warren Beatty would be Hollywood's eternal bachelor forever, a guy defined by his endless string of high-profile romances, he did something that surprised a lot of people: he settled down. In 1992, at 54, Beatty married actress Annette Bening, his co-star in the movie Bugsy. This marriage marked a huge public shift in his personal life, a move away from the playboy image that had defined him for over 3 decades. The marriage has, by Hollywood standards, been incredibly long-lasting. Beatty and Bening have been married for over 30 years and have 4 children together: Stephen, Ira, Benjamin, Isabel, and Ella. For many watching, this long marriage and his obvious devotion to his family seemed like a genuine transformation. Beatty himself has talked about the profound impact marriage and fatherhood had on him, often expressing deep love and admiration for Bening and their kids. He largely stepped back from the relentless pace of filmmaking for many years, reportedly to focus on raising his family, a move that seemed to show a real change in his priorities. A particularly interesting aspect of his family life that's come into public view is his support for his eldest child, Stephen Ira, who is a transgender man and activist. Beatty has publicly said how proud he is of Stephen, calling him his hero and a revolutionary. This public support, in a world still figuring out how to understand and accept transgender individuals, has been seen by many as a positive and praiseworthy part of Beatty's later life. It presented an image of a loving, supportive father, standing by his child. Though some earlier reports suggested there were initial struggles within the family about Stephen's transition, Beatty's more recent public statements have been completely supportive. This image of Beatty as a devoted husband and father, a man who seemingly traded his playboy past for domestic stability and progressive family values, stands in stark contrast to the darker allegations that have surfaced. It's a complex juxtaposition. Does his later life as a family man cancel out or lessen the seriousness of past alleged behaviors, especially those disturbing claims made in the dismissed Christina Charlotte Hirsch lawsuit? Or does it just add another layer to an already mysterious and contradictory personality? For some, the marriage to Benning and his family life might be seen as proof of redemption, a sign that the wildness of his youth gave way to mature responsibility. For others, especially with the #MeToo era and the serious nature of the 2022 allegations, his later respectability might seem like a well-kept facade that conveniently smooths over a more troubling past. The truth, as it often is with public figures, is probably complicated and has many sides. People can change and grow, but past actions, especially those involving alleged harm to others, cast long shadows. Warren Beatty's legacy was already a rich mix of cinematic achievement, legendary romantic adventures, and carefully guarded privacy. The addition of serious, though legally dismissed, accusations of sexual coercion involving a minor, followed by decades of what looks like a stable family life, makes that legacy even more intricate and, for many, deeply unsettling. It forces us to keep re-evaluating, who is the real Warren Beatty? The charming seducer, the acclaimed artist, the devoted family man, or a figure whose past holds secrets far darker than we previously imagined? The answer probably lies somewhere in the uncomfortable overlaps of all these identities. Warren Beatty's story is a stark reminder that the legends Hollywood creates can be both dazzling and deceptive. What are your thoughts on how his image has changed over the decades, especially with this recent information? Do you think the Playboy persona was harmless fun, or did it hide something more problematic? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you find these explorations into the complex histories of Hollywood interesting, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next one. Warren Beatty's journey through Hollywood fame has been pretty extraordinary. From his early days as a magnetic screen presence and Hollywood's most wanted bachelor, to his evolution into an Oscar-winning director and, later, a seemingly devoted family man, his story has always been captivating. For decades, the scandals linked to him were mostly romantic, a long list of famous lovers, broken hearts, and endless material for the gossip columns. He was the ultimate insider, a man who seemed to embody the glamour, power, and allure of Hollywood itself. However, the emergence of that 2022 lawsuit by Christina Charlotte Hirsch, alleging sexual coercion and abuse when she was a minor in 1973, fundamentally changed the way we have to look at Beatty's past, and his entire persona. Even though this lawsuit was dismissed on procedural grounds in December 2023, the allegations themselves brought a deeply disturbing element into his story. They shifted the narrative from one of a notorious playboy to one that included accusations of predatory behavior and the abuse of power against a child. These aren't the kind of scandals that just add to a roguish charm. These are allegations that demand serious thought and force a re-evaluation of a carefully built public image. The idea that the truth behind his carefully crafted image is far more shocking than the tabloids ever dared to print, takes on a chilling new meaning when you consider the details of Hirsch's claims. Beatty's own attempts to downplay his romantic reputation, to paint himself as misunderstood by an exaggerating press, now look different. His long-standing marriage to Annette Bening and his public support for his children, especially his son Stephen, present a contrasting image of a settled family man. But for many, this later chapter can't entirely erase the seriousness of the accusations about his earlier life. His legacy, once mostly defined by his movie achievements and his legendary status as a Hollywood Lothario, is now permanently complicated. It's a legacy that has to deal with unresolved questions about his conduct, power dynamics, and the potential hidden costs of his famous past. The witty, enigmatic figure who navigated Hollywood for over half a century now stands as a more controversial